Hi, and welcome to Why Do Countries Exist? An Introduction. So I hope the first episode of the podcast will be posted right away, so if you just want to jump into learning about history, you can skip this and go straight into enjoying that. I'm mainly going to be spending most of my time on this talking about what the show is and kind of explain why I'm going to talk about what I'm going to talk about. So the goal of the show is to go through every country on Earth and kind of talk about why this specific country came into existence and kind of a broad history of the country. I'll be looking mainly at what I consider to be important events in the country's founding and how it developed into what it is today. Depending on the country, this might mean I start 10,000 years ago and I go from there, or I start 100 years ago and I go from there. It'll all just depend on the country. I hope episodes will have a consistent length of somewhere between 10 to 40 minutes long, but we'll see what happens as the series progresses. I intend for every country to give you, the listener, a general outline of the country's history. I'm not going to go into great detail on every historical event in the country's history. My goal isn't to get the listener to become an expert, and I don't want to focus on getting bogged down in some of the smaller and finer details in history. I want the viewer to know how the country developed and became what it is today, but I also want you to know a little bit about the country, a little bit more than you might have known when you came into the show. I hope at the end of every episode I will be able to explain why the country existed and why it has managed to survive into the modern day and what the future for the country could potentially be. What defines a country is a complicated topic. A country can be considered a political state, with a state really being a political unit that governs itself. Places like America, Canada, and Mexico are what are known as sovereign states, meaning that they are states that consider themselves sovereign or have the highest authority in the lands they control, and are really recognized as such by other sovereign states. The problem in defining what is and isn't a state is not everyone agrees on what is or isn't a state. For example, you have states like Taiwan, Abkhazia, Kosovo, Somaliland, or Western Sahara that all have an unclear status. You have some people who would say, yes, all or most of them are a state, but there are many who would say that most or all of them aren't a state. It's a very complicated topic, and I could talk all day about if unrecognized states should or shouldn't be considered a country, but for the purposes of this podcast, unrecognized states will be considered as states. I will do episodes on them, but I will always mention their unrecognized aspect and the controversies surrounding them. Depending on how quick the episode is written, it might come out a week earlier or it might come out a couple of weeks later. It'll all just depend on the country and the level of research I have to do. At the very least, on weeks without a main episode, I'll try to do a side episode. Side episodes are going to be broadly less scripted and will probably be more political in nature. I'm not going to be talking about my thoughts on gun control or what I think the right foreign policy is, but I'll talk about political parties, ideologies, administrative divisions, elections, or just other stuff that interests me. I'll also talk about any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, or hate mail that was coming to the show. If you want to send any of that to me, you can email me at whydocountries.exist@gmail.com. If something interesting pops up in the news or it's just something I saw somewhere, I'll also talk about it then and just give general updates on the show. So finally, why did I make this show? Mainly, I made it just because I wanted to, and I think there's a lot of countries in the world who most people don't really think have that much of a history, or the history that is known is really filled with misconceptions. I do think all history is interesting, but I do think people can get caught up in some of the bigger events, characters, and countries, and they tend to lose focus on some of the smaller stuff. I hope at the very least to teach people about history and provide a little bit of entertainment. So, that was episode 0. Our next episode will be the country of Abkhazia in the Caucasus. Prepare yourself for me to butcher Georgian and Abkhazian names, and for disputed history galore. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.